still unclear how Play accessed their network.
This is even more serious now?
You know that nasty stuff that locks up your computer and holds your files hostage. Ransomware. You should be familiar by now. It's like a digital kidnapping, but instead of a person, it snatches your data. Ransomware isn't some new boogeyman. It's been lurking around the web for years, causing havoc for businesses, governments, and ordinary people like you and me. Imagine waking up one day, firing up your laptop, and boom, everything's encrypted. Your family photos, important documents, all that stuff you can't live without. Suddenly, it's all just gibberish. And there's a creepy message on your screen demanding Bitcoin to get it back. That's ransomware, baby, and it's a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry. But here's the thing, just when cybersecurity experts thought they had a handle on ransomware, a new player emerged from the shadows. A group so sophisticated, so ruthless, that it sent shockwaves through the entire digital security world. I'm talking about an operation so sneaky that it made the old-school hackers look like amateurs. I'm talking about the Play ransomware gang. We're about to dive into the story of a ransomware gang that rewrote the rulebook on cyber extortion. A group that combines cutting-edge tech skills with old-school criminal tactics. They're like the Navy SEALs of the cyber underworld. Elite, adaptable, and damn near unstoppable. So strap in, because we're about to unravel the saga of the Play ransomware gang. Trust me, by the time we're done, you'll never look at your computer the same way again. Alright, so we've got this new ransomware group called Play, right? They're just getting started, feeling out their capabilities. Then boom. August 13th, 2022. They go for their first big score. And man, do they pick a target. What was their target? You might ask. Well, it was the entire judiciary of Cordoba, Argentina. We're talking about a massive government institution responsible for, you know, upholding the law and all that important stuff. And these Play guys just waltz in and shut the whole thing down. It's like they walked into a courthouse, flipped the power switch, and said, "Court's adjourned indefinitely." The judiciary had to shut down all their IT systems. I'm talking computers, networks, even their online portal. Everything. Gone. Offline. It's like they got thrown back to the Stone Age overnight. You've got judges, lawyers, clerks, all these people who are used to having everything at their fingertips, suddenly scrambling for pens and paper. Can you imagine? You're a lawyer, you've got this big case coming up, and suddenly you can't access any of your files. No emails, no digital documents, nothing. You're literally going old school, writing out your arguments by hand like it's 1950 or something. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This attack brought a significant part of the Argentinian government to its knees. We're talking about a major disruption to the justice system of an entire province. Trials delayed, legal processes grinding to a halt. It's the kind of thing that can have ripple effects throughout society. And get this, according to Clarin, which is like the New York Times of Argentina, some sources were calling this the worst attack on public institutions in history. That's not just hyperbole, that's a serious statement about how bad this hit was. So here we are, watching this Play ransomware group go from a whisper on some tech forums to taking down a major government institution in a matter of months. It's like watching a rookie step into the ring and knock out the heavyweight champ in the first round. And let me tell you, this was just the beginning of their rampage. All right, so we've seen Play take down a court system in Argentina, right? But these guys, they're just getting started. Fast forward to December 2022, and they're not messing around with some local government anymore. No, they're going after an entire city. And not just any city. We're talking about Antwerp, Belgium. You know, one of the biggest ports in Europe, a major hub for diamond trading. This is big league stuff. So here's what went down. There's this company called Digipolis, right? They're the ones in charge of all the IT systems for the city of Antwerp. Imagine them like the tech backbone of the whole city. Well, Play decides to hit them, and hit them hard. Now, when you're talking about a city's IT infrastructure, you're not just talking about a few computers. We're talking about systems that run everything, from traffic lights to emergency services, from tax collection to waste management. And Play just waltzes in and shuts it all down. It's like they pulled the plug on the entire city's nervous system. The city would have had to fall back on its BCP plans, or business continuity plans. A business continuity plan is basically what organizations need to do in order to continue operating during a disaster scenario like this. But here's where it gets really nasty. Play doesn't just lock everything up. They claim they stole a massive amount of data. We're talking 557 gigabytes. To put that in perspective, that's like stealing over 100 million pages of text. And this isn't just any data. We're talking personal information, passports, IDs, financial documents. The kind of stuff that can ruin lives if it falls into the wrong hands. The published information was described by Belgian media as one of the largest stolen in the country. The cache of information they stole reportedly included crime report files, number plate information, and even fines from the past 16 years. So now you've got a major European city with its IT systems down, its email not working, even its phone services disrupted. And hanging over their heads is this threat that all this sensitive data about their citizens might get leaked online. It's like holding an entire city for ransom. This attack, it's a whole new level. It shows that Play isn't just some group of script kiddies messing around. They've got the skills and the guts to go after major targets, to disrupt the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. And they're not afraid to do it. It's at this point that cybersecurity experts around the world are really starting to sit up and take notice. Because if Play can do this to Antwerp, what's stopping them from hitting New York or Tokyo or any other major city? This is the moment when Play goes from being a nuisance to being a serious global threat. All right, let's talk about when Play really stepped up their game. We're still in December 2022, and these guys decide to go after Rackspace. Now, if you're not familiar with Rackspace, they're like the backbone of the internet for a lot of companies. They provide cloud computing services, which is basically like renting super powerful computers to run your business on. So Play pops Rackspace, and man, they got popped big time. They specifically targeted Rackspace's Microsoft Exchange environments. That's where a ton of businesses store their emails and other important stuff. It's like they went straight for the jugular of corporate America. The Play gang used this exploit called OWASSRF. It's like a digital lockpick, but way more sophisticated. This thing allowed them to bypass all the security measures Microsoft had put in place to protect against earlier attacks. It's like they found a secret backdoor that nobody else knew about. Let me break it down for you. This OWASSRF exploit is actually a combination of two different vulnerabilities. The first one, CVE 2022-41080, let them gain higher level access to the servers. It's like they got the keys to the executive bathroom, if you know what I mean. Then, they used another vulnerability, CVE 2022-41082, to actually run their own code on these servers. It's like they not only got into the building, but they also reprogrammed all the security cameras. What's really wild is how they did this. They used something called the OWA endpoint instead of the usual auto-discover. It's like they took a completely different route into the building that the guards weren't watching. But they didn't stop there. Once they were in, they dropped these remote access tools, things like Plink and AnyDesk. It's like leaving little digital soldiers behind to keep the doors open for them. For as long as these tools remained undiscovered, they could connect to these anytime they wanted, and they'd be right back into the heart of the network. This attack on rack space, it showed a whole new level of sophistication from Play. They weren't just smash and grab artists anymore. They were pulling off the largest robberies the world has ever seen. All right, so we've seen Play hit government targets, right? But now they're switching gears. And man, they're going after the private sector. And not just any company. They're targeting Arnold Clark, Europe's biggest independent car retailer. We're talking about a massive operation here. And this was their third successful attack in December 2022 alone. Think about that for a second. So picture this. It's December 23rd, 2022. Most people are getting ready for the holidays, maybe buying last-minute gifts. But the Play gang? They're busy breaking into Arnold Clark's systems. It's like they're the Grinch who stole Christmas, but instead of presents, they're after people's personal information. Arnold Clark isn't just some small-time car dealer. They're huge. We're talking about a company that sells cars all across Europe. And Play just waltzes in and steals a treasure trove of data. We're not talking about a few names and addresses here. No, they got their hands on the crown jewels. They stole names, contact details, birth dates. That's already pretty bad, right? But it gets worse. They also nabbed vehicle details. Think about it. That's information about what kind of car you drive, maybe even where you bought it. But wait, there's more. They also snagged ID documents. We're talking passports, driver's licenses, the kind of stuff you really don't want falling into the wrong hands. And in some cases, they even got national insurance numbers. That's like the UK version of social security numbers. It's the keys to the kingdom, man. But the cherry on top? Bank account details. Yeah, you heard that right. These guys potentially have access to people's financial information. It's like they robbed a bank, but instead of cash, they're walking away with all the account information. This attack, it's a whole new level for Play. They're not just going after governments anymore. They're showing they can hit big private companies too. They do it without blinking an eye. And they're not discriminating. They're taking every bit of personal info they can get their hands on. It's wild, man. One day you're buying a car, the next day your entire life story is in the hands of some ransomware gang. This attack on Arnold Clark, it's like Play announcing to the world, nobody's safe. We can get to anyone. And let me tell you, people are starting to take notice. Okay. So now we're almost a year later, October 2023, and Play decides to go big. I mean, really big. They hit Dallas County, Texas. We're not talking about a small-town operation here. This is a major metropolitan area with millions of people. So, Dallas County officials wake up one morning to find out they've been hacked. And not just a little bit hacked. We're talking about a massive data breach that affected over 200,000 people. That's like filling up the Dallas Cowboys stadium 3 times over with just the victims of this attack. Now, here's where it gets really scary. The Play gang didn't just break in and mess with some files. No, they stole a ton of personal data. We're talking about the kind of information you really don't want falling into the wrong hands. Full names, social security numbers, birth dates, that's just the start. They also got driver's license info, state ID numbers, taxpayer identification numbers. It's like they walked into the county records office and just took everything. But wait, it gets worse. They even snagged medical information and health insurance details. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that stays private for a reason. I don't need to explain this. Just think about how an attacker might use this against someone that's vulnerable. But Play didn't just steal this data. They added Dallas County to their extortion portal on the dark web. They're threatening to leak all this private information if their demands aren't met. Now, imagine you're one of those 200,000 people. You get a notification saying, "Hey, all your personal info might be in the hands of cyber criminals." That's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, you know? You're wondering if someone's going to steal your identity, mess with your medical records, or worse. And let me tell you, this is when people really started to sit up and take notice. It's one thing when it's a government agency or a big company getting hit. But when it's your neighbor, your friend, maybe even you who's affected, that's when it gets real. This Dallas County attack, it's like Play announcing to the world, we can get to anyone, anywhere, and we can take everything. All right, the big guns are finally stepping in. The FBI, CISA, and even the Australian Cybersecurity Centre are all teaming up to sound the alarm on Play. It's like the Avengers of cybersecurity coming together, man. So, these agencies dropped this bombshell. Play has hit around 300 organizations worldwide in just over a year. That's not just a few random attacks, that's a full-on global assault. These guys have been busy hitting targets across North America, South America, and Europe. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The feds break down exactly how Play operates, and let me tell you, it's like something out of a high-tech heist movie. First off, they're not just breaking in through one door. They're using multiple ways to get into systems, abusing valid accounts, exploiting public-facing applications, utilizing remote desktop protocol and VPNs or virtual private networks. Once they're in, they start snooping around. They're using all these tools with crazy names like AdFind and Bloodhound, used to query and retrieve information from Active Directory. Grixpa, an information stealer, to enumerate network information and scan for antivirus software. They use these to move around without getting caught. And then, when they're ready to strike, they pull out the big guns. Tools like Cobalt Strike, System BC, and PSExec for command and control applications to assist with lateral movement and file execution. The combination of all these tools is professional-grade stuff. When they're ready to steal data and lock everything up, they're not just using one method. They're compressing files with WinRAR, transferring data with WinSCP, a file transfer application, and then using this crazy hybrid encryption that combines AES and RSA. It's like they're not just locking your data in a safe, they're putting that military-grade safe inside another safe and then launching it into space. Remember their technique of intermittent encryption, where they only encrypt every other chunk of data? Yep, law enforcement made mention of this too, letting people know what to expect if you've got this threat actor in your network. The list of tools these guys use is insane. GMER, IOBit, and PowerTool to disable antivirus software and remove log files. They search for unsecured credentials by using the Mimikatz credential dumper to gain domain administrator access in their victims' networks. They use tools like Microsoft NL Test for network discovery, and then necto privy cmd for privilege escalation. They even use Windows privilege escalation awesome scripts, WinPiz, to search for additional privilege escalation paths. To help them map out the victim's network and figure out what computers were doing, they used a tool called Process Hacker to enumerate running processes on a system. Then they used Plink to establish persistent SSH tunnels to infected computers. These guys have tools for every situation. This advisory, it's not just a warning. It's the world's top cybersecurity experts saying, "Holy cow, these Play guys are the real deal. They're not just some random hackers anymore. They're a major global threat, and they've got everyone from the FBI to the Aussies worried." The internet is a lot more dangerous than we thought. And Play? They're leading the charge into this brave new world of cybercrime. So after the FBI disclosed the inner workings of this ransomware group, you thought they might be on the defensive now. They know law enforcement and organizations around the globe are on the hunt for this threat. Information is now out there for companies to safeguard their networks. But you know how it goes. Play doesn't care at all. In fact, Play decides to up the ante. We're talking August 2024, and these guys set their sights on microchip technology. Now, if you're not familiar with microchip technology, these guys make those tiny little chips that go into everything from your car to your smart fridge. So, Play hits microchip technology, and it's not just a little tap. We're talking about a full-on body blow to their operations. Multiple manufacturing facilities get hit, and suddenly, this company that's cranking out millions of chips is forced to slow down to a crawl. Microchip technology is forced to shut down some of their systems and isolate others. Even with all these measures, they're still operating at reduced capacity. They can't meet their orders, which means all those companies waiting for chips. They're out of luck. And let me tell you, in our interconnected world, this isn't just microchip technology's problem. This is a ripple effect that's going to hit global supply chains hard. We're talking about potential delays in everything from car production to the latest smartphones. It's like Play didn't just attack a company, they attacked the entire tech industry. But wait, it gets worse. Fast forward to September, and microchip technology drops another bombshell. They confirm that employee data was stolen in the attack. We're talking about a treasure trove of personal information, contact details, encrypted passwords, the works. Now, microchip technology is trying to downplay it, saying they don't think any customer or supplier data was taken. But let's be real here. They're still investigating. They don't know the full extent of what was stolen. It's like they're still trying to figure out what's missing after a burglar ransacked their house. So what if customer data was stolen? We're talking about information from some of the biggest tech companies in the world. If that data is out there, it's not just microchip technology that's in trouble. It's potentially every company they work with, which is pretty much everyone in the tech industry. This attack on microchip technology, it's not just another notch on Play's belt. It's a demonstration of their power, their reach. They're showing the world that they can disrupt global industries, that no one is safe. They're not afraid of law enforcement. This could just be the beginning. We've been on one hell of a ride tracking the Play ransomware gang, but this story isn't over, not by a long shot. They've stolen data, locked up systems, and caused chaos across the globe. And you know what's really messed up? They're still out there. Law enforcement agencies worldwide have been trying to catch these guys, but it's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. Play keeps slipping through their fingers. They're winning the battle. Now, I'm not a betting man, But if I had to guess, I'd say play's not done. What's next? Hospitals? Power grids? The possibilities are scary, man, and to add insult to injury. Play isn't the only threat out there. They're just the one we're talking about today. The cyber world is like the Wild West. Every time the good guys come up with a new defense, the bad guys find a way around it. The stakes? They're higher than ever. We're not just talking about mediocre attacks or hackers anymore. As time goes on, the hackers get better too. So where does this leave us? In a pretty uncomfortable spot, if I'm being honest. We're living in a world where our entire lives are online, where our most sensitive information is floating around in the cloud. And there are people out there, smart people, dedicated people, who are working day and night to steal that information, to hold it for ransom, to use it for who knows what. The Play ransomware gang? They're just the tip of the iceberg. They're a symptom of a much bigger problem. We're in an age where cyber threats are evolving faster than we can keep up. And unless something changes, unless we find a way to get ahead of this curve, we're going to be telling stories like this for a long time to come. So yeah, the threat is looming. It's real, it's serious, and it's not going away anytime soon. Welcome to the digital age. It's not at all pretty. Let me know in the comments what you think of Play ransomware gang, and if any of their attacks impacted you directly or indirectly.
In the extreme heat of August 2024, a serious threat was developing in the depths of the internet. The cybersecurity landscape, once relatively predictable, was about to be severely disrupted by another dangerous entity. On August 5th, unexpectedly, a new malware campaign quietly entered the online world. This wasn't just an ordinary computer virus. It was a sophisticated threat, a previously unknown backdoor that would soon be called Voldemort. Its name, which originates from the Harry Potter wizarding world, was feared by many. This Dark Lord was set to cause widespread damage. The malware effectively disguised itself brilliantly, pretending to be tax agencies from the United States, Europe, and Asia. It preyed on the trust that people place in official government communications. The scale and speed of Voldemort's spread were nothing short of alarming. According to a report by Proofpoint, a respected cybersecurity firm, the campaign began rapidly. In a matter of days, it had sent over 20,000 emails to more than 70 targeted organizations worldwide. At its highest point, this flood of emails reached an alarming 6,000 in a single day. To understand the gravity of this situation, let's break down some key concepts. Malware, short for malicious software, is any program designed to harm or exploit computer systems. Think of it as kind of like a disease, because it infects computers and spreads from one to another. Voldemort was a particularly nasty strain of malware, and you'll soon see why. The campaign relied heavily on phishing, a technique where attackers trick people into revealing sensitive information or clicking on malicious links. It's like a fisherman casting a net, hoping to catch unsuspecting victims. In this case, the bait was just fraudulent emails that appeared to come from legitimate tax agencies. What made Voldemort especially concerning was its nature as a targeted attack. Unlike broad, indiscriminate attacks that hope to catch anyone, targeted attacks are like precision strikes. The attackers carefully choose their victims, tailoring their approach to maximize their chances of someone clicking on it. It's like the difference between buckshot and slug rounds. As news of Voldemort's emergence spread through the cybersecurity community, experts scrambled to understand its capabilities and devise countermeasures. But this was just the beginning. The true extent of Voldemort's powers and the havoc it would wreak were yet to be revealed, so brace yourself for what's to come. Now, don't get ahead of yourself. This was no indiscriminate attack. Remember, Voldemort had carefully chosen its targets. Over half of the organizations in its crosshairs were from 4 key sectors: insurance, aerospace, transportation, and education. The cybersecurity firm Proofpoint, which first detected and reported on Voldemort, believed they knew the endgame. This wasn't about causing chaos or demanding ransom. No, the objective was worse. Way worse. It was cyber espionage. Cyber espionage, in simple terms, is spying. Instead of secret agents sneaking into offices to steal documents, hackers use malware to silently infiltrate computer systems and steal sensitive information. It's a way for countries or organizations to gain an unfair advantage by stealing others' secrets. What made Voldemort particularly dangerous was its use of a command and control server, or C2 for short. Think of a C2 server as the malware's headquarters. It's where the hackers send instructions to the infected computers and where stolen data is sent back. But Voldemort had a twist. It was using Google Sheets, a common and trusted platform, as its C2 server. This made it incredibly hard to detect. As the days passed and more details emerged, the cybersecurity community grew increasingly alarmed. Voldemort wasn't just another piece of malware. It represented a new level of sophistication as it utilized modern-day software. And as experts raced to unravel its secrets, one question stuck out to everybody watching. Who was behind this attack? And what were their true intentions? You've got a new tax document, the email might say. Click here to view it. And many did click, never suspecting the danger that lurked behind that innocent-looking link. But this is where things got clever. Clicking the link didn't immediately unleash the malware. Instead, it led to a seemingly harmless web page hosted on Infinity Free, a legitimate free web hosting service. This page used something called Google AMP Cache URLs, a tool normally used to make web pages load faster, to redirect the victim again. Now, if you're not too tech-savvy, this might sound confusing. Think of it like this. The hackers were sending their victims on a wild goose chase across the internet, using trusted services as camouflage. It's the equivalent of smuggling a dangerous package into a secure building by hiding it in a commonly used and trusted delivery service. The next step was even more devious. The web page would check what kind of computer the victim was using. If it was a Windows PC, it would use a special trick involving something called a search MS URI. This is a feature in Windows that's meant to help you search for files. But in this case, the hackers were exploiting it to bypass security controls and place the malware onto the computer. If the victim fell for this trick, they'd see what looked like a normal PDF file. But it wasn't a PDF at all. It was actually a special kind of file that, when opened, would run a script, a set of instructions for the computer. This script was particularly sneaky. It didn't even need to be downloaded to run. Instead, it used something called WebDAV, which is normally used for editing documents over the internet. The script would gather information about the victim's computer, helping the hackers understand where they were in the network and what they'd managed to infiltrate. Finally, in a move so diabolical and clever, the script would download a legitimate program, Cisco WebEx, a popular video conferencing tool. But along with it came a malicious file that used a technique called DLL sideloading. This is like smuggling a criminal into a building by having them walk in alongside a group of authorized employees. And just like that, Voldemort would be installed, ready to do the bidding of its dark masters. The entire process was a masterclass in deception, using trusted tools and services in ways they were never intended, all to bypass the watchful eyes of security systems. If this was just the delivery method, what horrors might the Voldemort malware itself be capable of? The investigation was far from over, and the worst they feared was yet to come. As cybersecurity experts dug deeper into the Voldemort malware, they uncovered a level of sophistication that left them both impressed and deeply concerned. The malware's capabilities were not just advanced, they were cunning in their simplicity and devastating in their potential impact. The range of commands at Voldemort's disposal was extensive. It could ping systems to check if they were still under its control, like a shepherd counting his flock. It could list directories, giving the attackers a map of the infected system's files. More alarmingly, it could download files from the infected system or upload new ones, allowing the attackers to steal data or introduce new threats at will. But that wasn't all. Voldemort could execute programs on the infected system, copy or move files around, and even put itself to sleep to avoid detection. And when its job was done, it could simply exit, leaving little trace of its presence. What made this particularly insidious was how Voldemort used Google's own API to interact with the Google Sheets. It had its own client ID, secret and refresh token, essentially its own set of keys to the kingdom. This allowed it to write data to specific cells within the Google Sheet, each infected machine reporting back to its own designated spot. To manage this network of infected systems, Voldemort used unique identifiers for each machine, like name tags for its army of digital zombies. This allowed the attackers to keep track of each system compromised and let them manage their ill-gotten gains with frightening efficiency. This wasn't just another piece of malware. It was a new breed of virus, one that used our own tools against us. The story of Voldemort was far from over. In fact, it seemed that the worst was yet to come. As the cybersecurity community grappled with the Voldemort threat, a chilling realization happened. This wasn't the first time they had seen something like this. Like a detective piecing together clues from old case files, experts started to draw connections to past incidents. Rewind to 2023, and we encounter a group known as APT-41. Now, APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat, and it's a term used for highly skilled hacking groups, often backed by governments. APT-41 is believed to be supported by China, and they're known for their sophisticated attacks. In 2023, APT-41 was caught using a tool called GC2, short for Google Command and Control. This tool, originally designed for testing security systems, a practice known as red teaming, was being used for something far more sinister. APT-41 had turned it into a weapon for stealing data from a Taiwanese media company and an Italian job search firm. What made GC2 special? It used Google Sheets as a command center. They could send commands to compromised devices and even use Google Drive to download more malicious software or upload stolen data. Now, as cybersecurity experts looked at Voldemort, they couldn't help but notice the similarities. The use of Google Sheets as a command center was particularly striking. It was like finding the same fingerprint at two different crime scenes. While there was no concrete proof that APT-41 was behind Voldemort, the parallels were hard to ignore. Had this notorious group evolved their tactics? Was Voldemort the next generation of their cyber weapons? The threat landscape was changing. The lines between everyday tools and cyber weapons were blurring. Whoever was behind it, there was one thing for sure. This wasn't just another script kiddie, it was a highly sophisticated cyber attack. The implications were global and potentially devastating. The targeted industries sent alarm bells ringing. Insurance companies, with millions and millions of personal and financial data. Aerospace firms, holding the blueprints to cutting-edge technologies. Transportation networks, the glue of modern commerce. And educational institutions, treasure troves of intellectual property and groundbreaking research. It was as if the attackers had cherry-picked the sectors most crucial to a nation's functioning and progress. Clearly, these weren't random choices. Imagine the chaos if an insurance giant's systems went down, leaving millions unable to file claims, or if an aerospace company's designs were stolen, compromising national security. The potential for disruption was enormous, and it's not hard to see why a hacking group like APT-41 would seek to extract such important information. It wasn't just about stealing data, it was about gaining a strategic advantage on a global scale. But who could be behind such an ambitious and far-reaching campaign? The sophistication of the attack, particularly its use of Google Sheets as a command and control server, bore an uncanny resemblance to tactics used by APT-41, a notorious Chinese state-sponsored hacking group. While there was no concrete proof of their involvement, the similarities were too striking to ignore. The possibility of nation-state involvement raised the stakes exponentially. This wasn't just cybercrime, it was potentially cyber warfare. So, you might be wondering, what was Google doing? Well, they sprang into action. Google, whose services had been so cleverly exploited by Voldemort, found itself in an uncomfortable spotlight. Like a homeowner who discovers their house has been used for a heist, the company is now rethinking how they might adapt to such a threat. Google's engineers combed over their systems thoroughly, looking for ways to prevent their services from being used as tools for cybercrime. It was a delicate balance. How to maintain the openness and flexibility that made their products so popular, while also keeping the bad guys out. The cybersecurity firm Proofpoint, which had first uncovered the Voldemort threat, offered some advice. They suggested limiting access to external file-sharing services, only allowing connections to trusted servers. They also recommended blocking connections to Cloudflare when it wasn't needed. Cloudflare, a service meant to help website owners, was another tool that had been used by the attackers as part of this malware communications. Another suggestion was to keep a close eye on something called PowerShell execution. PowerShell is a tool that helps you talk to your computer as well as manage it, but in the wrong hands, it can be used to do harm. The most drastic measure was to remove the Search MS protocol handler from the Windows registry. In simple terms, this meant disabling the feature that Voldemort had exploited. These measures, access control, network segmentation, monitoring, and registry modifications were complex concepts, but they all boiled down to one simple idea, making it harder for the bad guys to get in and easier to spot them if they did. Companies and individuals around the world rushed to implement these defenses because they couldn't tell the difference between innocent-looking network traffic and something sinister. But remember, what worked yesterday might not protect us tomorrow. This means we all need to keep updated with cybersecurity threats and stay updated on hacking groups like APTs that target such important industries. It's not just for IT professionals anymore. In 2024, everyone needs a basic understanding of cybersecurity. The story of Voldemort isn't just about a clever piece of malware. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that hackers like these aren't going anywhere. If you're using the Google Suite on your computer, I want to hear from you. What will you do to protect yourself from threats like this? Either way, one thing is clear. The next chapter in cybersecurity is being written right now, and you, that's watching, you have a part to play in it. Don't go anywhere. We've got more true cybercrime and hacking stories coming right up.
It all started in early March 2024. The Alpha ransomware operation, also named BLACKCAT, one of the big players in the hacking world, suddenly went dark. They claimed the FBI had caught up with them and seized all their computers and servers. But that wasn't the truth. They pulled off what's known as an exit scam. Basically, they took the money and ran. Imagine if you joined a criminal gang, did all the dirty work, and then the boss disappeared with all the loot, leaving you with nothing. They were trying to shut down and run off with affiliates' money by pretending the FBI seized their site and infrastructure. A longtime partner of the BLACKCAT gang, known only as Nachi, came forward with a shocking claim. He said the gang had stolen a massive $22 million ransom payment from a recent attack. This $22 million was BLACKCAT's largest payment yet, but we'll get into the specifics of that later. Just know, they took it all. Remember, there's no honor among thieves. But the BLACKCAT gang wasn't done yet. In a bizarre move, they decided to also sell off their hacking tools. The gang announced they are now selling the source code for the malware for the hefty price of $5 million. It's like a chef selling their secret recipes right before swapping careers or something. You get the idea. As for the stolen money, they didn't just put it all in one place. After getting the funds, the recipient address that allegedly belongs to these operators distributed the bitcoins to various wallets in equal transactions of about $3.3 million. They split it up, probably hoping to make it harder to track. This whole mess shows us a few important things about how these hacker groups work. First, there's the exit scam itself. A reminder that even in the world of cybercrime, trust is a rare commodity. Then there's the fact that they pretended the FBI had caught them. This kind of law enforcement impersonation is a common tactic to buy time or throw people off the scent. Finally, the insider threats in cybercrime. Just like in any organization, the people closest to the center of power can often do the most damage. In this case, it was the leaders of the BLACKCAT gang who turned on their own members. Just when we thought the BLACKCAT saga had ended, a new player emerged on the scene. In June 2024, barely 3 months after BLACKCAT's dramatic exit, a new ransomware operation called Cicada 3301 appeared. At first glance, it might have seemed like just another hacker group trying to make a quick buck. But as cybersecurity experts dug deeper, they started to find some interesting clues. Cicada 3.301 wasn't just similar to BLACKCAT. It was practically its twin. Both were written in a programming language called Rust, which isn't all that common in the hacking world. It's like two chefs using the same rare spice in their secret recipes. They both use the same encryption method too, something called Cha-Cha-20. But the similarities didn't stop there. The way Cicada 3.301 attacked virtual machines, those are like computers within computers that companies often use, was identical to BLACKCAT's methods. They even used the same commands to shut down these virtual machines and delete their backups. An analysis of the new malware by security company TrueSec revealed significant overlaps between Cicada 3.301 and Alpha, or BLACKCAT, indicating a possible rebrand or a fork created by former core team members. In plain English, that means Cicada 3.301 might just be BLACKCAT with a new name, or maybe some of BLACKCAT's old members starting a new group. The timing was suspicious too. Cicada 3.301 first attacked a victim on June 6, 2024. By September 2nd, they had 19 victims listed on their website where they threatened to leak stolen data. That's a lot of attacks in a short time for a supposedly new group. One interesting thing to note was that on June 29th, Cicada 3.301 started recruiting other hackers to work with them. They posted about this on a hacker forum called RAMP, a forum where hackers gather to share their tools and tactics. It's like a job board for cybercriminals. Cicada 3.301 was looking for partners, other hackers who could use their ransomware to attack companies. But we know they were already active before this. Remember, Cicada attacks were noticed as early as June 6th, indicating that the gang was operating independently before attempting to recruit affiliates. So what does all this mean? Well, it looks like the people behind Cicada 3.301 might be experienced hackers who knew exactly what they were doing from the start. They didn't need time to figure things out. They hit the ground running. In the world of cybercrime, this kind of quick start and familiar tactics often means one thing. We're not dealing with newcomers, but with old pros under a new name. It's like a band changing their name but playing the same songs. The audience were starting to hear the similarities. As we delve deeper into the workings of Cicada 3.301, we find ourselves marveling at the sophistication of these elite hackers. Like a master thief who can pick any lock, the ransomware they created and deployed against their victims is designed to break into both Windows and Linux systems, as well as something called VMware ESXi. Think of it as a system that runs multiple computers within a single machine. But what truly sets Cicada 3.301 apart is its cunning approach. It doesn't just lock away your files and demand money. No, it goes a step further, threatening to leak your sensitive data if you don't pay up. This is what we call double extortion tactics. It's like a burglar, not only locking you out of your house, but also threatening to publish your diary if you don't pay the ransom. The technical details of Cicada 3.301 read like a villain's toolkit. It can shut down virtual machines and delete their backups, making recovery even harder. It used a tool within Rust called OSRAONG, a random number generator, to generate random encryption keys, making each attack unique and harder to crack. One particularly sneaky feature is the sleep parameter. This allows the ransomware to lie dormant for a while before striking, like a predator waiting patiently in the grass. It's a clever way to avoid detection by security systems. When Cicada 3.301 encrypts your files, it doesn't just lock them away. It adds a random 7-character extension to each file name, like a signature of its handiwork. And it leaves behind ransom notes with names like recover, extension data.txt, a chilling reminder of its presence. But perhaps most intriguing is how it handles different file sizes. For files larger than 100 megabytes, it only encrypts parts of them. Smaller files get fully encrypted. Essentially, it knows exactly when to deploy intermittent encryption and when to encrypt the entire file. This level of sophistication, my friends, is what makes Cicada 3301 a formidable foe in the world of cybercrime. It's not just a simple lock-and-key operation, but a multifaceted attack that leaves its victims with few options and many headaches. Now, let's talk about how they get into companies' systems. There's a strong suspicion that Cicada 3301 is working with something called the Brutus botnet. A botnet is like an army of infected computers that hackers can control. This particular one, Brutus, is known for attacking VPNs, the software companies use to let employees work from home securely. The Brutus botnet has been around since at least March 2024, right after BLACKCAT disappeared. It's been trying to guess passwords for VPNs from big companies like Cisco, Fortinet, Palo Alto, and SonicWall. In one attack, Cicada 3301 used an IP address, that's like a computer's home address on the internet, that was linked to Brutus. The initial attack began when the hacker was using valid credentials, either stolen or brute-forced, to log in using ConnectWise's Screen Connect. They connected from the Brutus IP address shown on screen. This partnership, if it exists, is clever. Brutus provides the way in, and Cicada 3301 delivers the knockout punch with its ransomware. It's a bit like a burglar working with someone who can pick any lock. Together, they're much more dangerous. In this digital age, my friends, the threats evolve as quickly as the technology meant to stop them. Today's cyber criminals are not lone wolves, but organized groups with business models that mirror legitimate companies. They recruit, they partner, they adapt, and in doing so, they pose a threat that grows more sophisticated with each passing day. Friends, let us now turn our attention to the real-world consequences of these hackers. Specifically the attack in March 2024, which led to the exit scam and rebranding. A company called Change Healthcare fell victim to a devastating attack. This wasn't just another faceless corporation being targeted. No, this was an attack that reached into the lives of everyday people. People like you and me. You see, Change Healthcare isn't some abstract entity. When it was hit, the impact rippled out across the country. As one report put it, the Change Healthcare attack had significantly impacted the U.S. healthcare system because services used by pharmacies and doctors to file claims with insurance companies were disrupted. Imagine going to your local pharmacy to pick up your usual medication. You hand over your prescription, just as you've done countless times before. But this time, something's different. The pharmacist looks at you apologetically and says, "I'm sorry, but we can't process your insurance right now. You'll have to pay full price." This wasn't just a hypothetical scenario. It was the harsh reality for many Americans. Patients could no longer use discount cards or receive medications under their normal insurance plans, forcing them to temporarily pay full price for critical medications. For people who didn't have the money readily available to them at the time, well, they were tough out of luck. But the nightmare doesn't end there. The attackers didn't just disrupt the system, they stole data, a lot of data. The hackers claimed to steal 6 terabytes of data from Change Healthcare, containing the healthcare information for millions of US citizens. Now, 6 terabytes might not mean much to you, but let me put it in perspective. That's enough space to store about 1.5 million photos, or 3,000 hours of video. But this wasn't filled with vacation snapshots or cat videos. No, this was packed with sensitive health information and personally identifiable information, or PII, of millions of people. This, my friends, is what we call a critical infrastructure attack. It's not just about money or data, it's about targeting the very systems that keep our society functioning. And let's not forget the data breach aspect. Millions of people's most private information, their health records, are now in the hands of criminals. The potential for misuse is quite disgusting. If healthcare information is leaked, hackers may sell this data to criminals who might try to blackmail people that have embarrassing or sensitive records. It's really horrible, and I'd hope no one watching ever faces that nightmare scenario. This is the true face of cybercrime in our modern age. It's not just about stealing credit card numbers or defacing websites anymore. These attacks can disrupt entire sectors of our economy, affect the health and well-being of millions, and expose our most personal information to the world. As we ponder the implications of this attack, we must ask ourselves, in this interconnected world we've built, are we truly prepared for the consequences when these systems fail? And what responsibility do we bear as a society to protect our most vulnerable from these invisible, yet all too real threats? And what of Cicada 3301, the real company? Yes, the ones behind the internet mystery between 2012 and 2014. As we delve deeper into the Cicada 3301 saga, we find ourselves feeling sorry for the people they're impersonating. Enter Cicada 3301 Metaverse LLC, a legitimate company that suddenly found itself thrust into this affair. Some news organizations have falsely blamed Cicada 3301 for alleged ransomware cyber attacks. They were in disbelief when they woke up for their morning coffee and saw this on the headlines. Yet, this wasn't the first time they'd been wrongly accused. A similar incident occurred in July 2015 when Cicada 3301 was falsely accused of a cyber attack on Planned Parenthood. It seems that in the world of cybercrime, names can be as dangerous as the malware itself. The real Cicada 3301 was quick to distance themselves from these accusations. We do not know the identity of the criminals behind these heinous crimes and are not associated with these groups in any way, they declared. We are law-abiding citizens. We do not engage in illegal activities. We don't hack or distribute malware. Their frustration was evident. We do not condone the use of our name, number, or symbolism, they said, like a respected family finding their name dragged through the mud by a distant criminal relative. Whoever did this has no affiliation with us. This, my friends, is the complex ecosystem of cybercrime. It's a world where criminals impersonate legitimate businesses, where accusations fly like arrows in the dark, and where the innocent can find themselves tarred with the same brush as the guilty. It's a reminder of the challenges law enforcement faces in attributing these attacks. On the internet, appearances can be deceiving, and the true culprits often hide behind stolen names and false identities. So this is where we currently stand. How long before the hackers behind ALPHV, BLACKCAT, and Cicada 3301 pull the same old trick? If you want to stay updated on the evolving threat, then make sure to subscribe, as we'll be the first to let you know. Stay tuned, the next story is coming right up, and it's way more sinister than this one.
Hey, have you ever wondered what keeps the internet running smoothly? Well, let me tell you about this crazy thing called WordPress. It's like the backbone of the internet, boy. Millions of websites use it. From your favorite blog to big company site, it's everywhere. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There's a plugin for WordPress called Lightspeed Cache. It's not just some small-time add-on. We're talking about a beast with over 6 million active installations. That's more people than in some countries. Lightspeed Cache is like a turbo boost for websites. It's got all these fancy features to make sites run faster. Imagine you're driving a car, right? Lightspeed Cache is like adding a supercharger, upgrading the tires, and streamlining the body all at once. It's got this thing called server-level caching, which is like having a super efficient pit crew for your website. But wait, there's more. It's got this free, quick cloud CDN cache. CDN stands for Content Delivery Network. It's like having multiple copies of your website stored around the world, so people can access it faster, no matter where they are. It's pretty wild stuff. Then there's all these other features: image optimization, minification of CSS and JavaScript. That's like compressing all the code to make it run faster, lazy loading of images, so your page loads quicker, and even database optimization. It's compatible with all sorts of other WordPress tools too, like WooCommerce for online stores and Yoast SEO for search engine optimization. And get this, it works with different types of web servers. You've got your Lightspeed servers, Apache, NGINX. Lightspeed Cache plays nice with all of them. Though to be fair, you need Lightspeed servers or this quick cloud CDN to get all the bells and whistles. It's like this perfect tool for WordPress sites. But here's the thing. When something's this popular and this powerful, it can also be a target. And that's where our story really begins. So, check this out. It's April 2024, right? Everything's going smooth in the WordPress world. People are blogging, selling stuff online, living their digital lives. But behind the scenes, boy, something sinister is brewing. You've got this plugin, Lightspeed Cache, that millions of people use to make their websites faster. But here's the kicker. There's this old vulnerability in it. The tech guys call it CVE 2023-40,000. If you haven't patched your website by now, well, your website is a ticking time bomb. This vulnerability is what they call a cross-site scripting flaw. It's like leaving your front door wide open, but on the internet. Hackers can just walk right in and do whatever they want on your website. But here's where it gets crazy. A security team called Automatic. These are the WordPress big shots. They start noticing some weird activity. There's this one IP address, right? This single address is hammering WordPress sites like there's no tomorrow. We're talking over 1.2 million attempts to break in. That's not just some kid in a basement. That's a serious operation. So what are these hackers doing? They're injecting malicious JavaScript code into WordPress files and databases. It's like they're planting little landmines all over these websites. And here's the scary part. They're creating these fake admin accounts. They're calling them WordPress support user or WordPress configurizer. Sounds legit, right? But it's not. It's the hackers getting the keys to the kingdom. This is serious stuff, boy. We're talking about potentially millions of WordPress sites at risk. And the worst part? Most people have no idea it's happening. They're just going about their day, not realizing there's a digital war going on right under their noses. It's like the start of a cyber apocalypse, and Lightspeed Cache is ground zero. But this is just the beginning. All right, so we're cruising along, thinking everything's cool after that first scare, right? After all, they were only targeting an old vulnerability. But then, out of nowhere on August 19th, 2024, disaster strikes, and it's like someone just dropped a nuke on the WordPress world. The WordFence Threat Intelligence Team, these are like the Navy SEALs of WordPress security. They discover this insane vulnerability in Lightspeed Cache. Now, we're not talking about some small-time plugin here. This thing is installed on over 5 million WordPress sites. That's a lot of websites, boy. Now, let me break this down for you. This vulnerability, they're calling it CVE 2024, 28,000. It's got this crazy high CVSS score of 9.8. For those of you who don't know, CVSS is like a danger meter for computer stuff. 9.8 is basically holy crap, we're all screwed level. So what's the deal with this vulnerability? It's what they call an unauthenticated privilege escalation. Basically, it means that some random person on the internet, without even having an account on your site, can trick the system into thinking they're an admin. It's like if a complete stranger could walk into a bank, flash a piece of paper, and suddenly everyone treats them like they own the place. The tech details are wild. There's this part of the plugin that's supposed to let admins test how the site looks for different user roles. But the way it's set up, it's like leaving the keys to the kingdom just sitting on the doorstep. Here's the crazy part. All an attacker needs to do is mess with some cookies in their browser, and boom, they're in. Let me show you a bit of this code. Don't worry if you don't understand it. It's just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. See that last line? That's basically the plugin saying, "Oh, you say you're an admin? Cool, come on in." No checks, no balances, nothing. This is serious stuff, boy. We're talking about 5 million websites potentially at risk. That's a lot of people's data, their businesses, their lives, all hanging in the balance because of some lines of code. This isn't some theoretical thing. This vulnerability is out there, right now, in versions of Lightspeed Cache 6.3.0.1 and earlier. If you're running one of those, it's like leaving your front door wide open in a bad neighborhood. The good news, there's a patch. Version 6.4 fixes this mess. But here's the million-dollar question. How many of those 5 million sites are going to update in time, and how many hackers exploited this before anyone caught up? All right, so we've got this massive vulnerability, right? Well, you're about to see how fast things go from bad to worse. It's like watching a wildfire spread in real time. So, on August 20th, WordFence, the guys trying to protect WordPress sites, they released this firewall rule. It's like a digital shield for websites using their premium services. But here's the kicker. If you're using the free version, you've got to wait a whole month for protection. A month. That's like seeing a tsunami coming and being told you can't evacuate for 30 days. The technical details of this vulnerability get published, and boy, the hackers waste no time. Within hours, not days, not weeks, hours, the attacks start rolling in. You want to know how bad it got? In just 24 hours, WordFence detected and blocked over 48,500 attacks. That's not a typo. 48,500 attacks in a single day. It's like the entire hacker community suddenly decided to throw a party, and every WordPress site running Lightspeed Cache was invited. This isn't just some random poking around. This was intense, focused exploitation. These hackers are going after this vulnerability like sharks in a feeding frenzy. And remember, this is just what one security firm caught. Who knows how many attacks slipped through the cracks? It's wild to think about, right? One day, everything's fine. The next, you've got tens of thousands of attacks hammering websites all over the world. And all because of a few lines of code in a plugin that's supposed to make your site faster. We're only a couple of days into this crisis, and already the internet's on fire. Imagine what's going to happen in the coming weeks if people don't patch their sites fast enough. Just when you thought it was safe to go back on the internet, September 5th, 2024 rolls around, and you're not going to believe this, but Lightspeed Cache gets hit with another critical vulnerability. They're calling it CVE 2024-44000. It's like the sequel nobody asked for, but here we are. So what's the deal this time? It's an unauthenticated account takeover vulnerability. That's a mouthful, right? Basically, it means that some random person on the internet, without even having an account, can sneak in and pretend to be a logged-in user. And if they're really crafty, they can become an admin. It's like if a stranger could walk into your house, put on your clothes, and suddenly your family thinks they're you. Now, here's where it gets really wild. This vulnerability is all about stealing session cookies. It's like the digital equivalent of swiping someone's ID badge. The plugin's got this debug logging feature, right? Well, it's spilling the beans, leaking HTTP response headers, including the set cookie header. That's the golden ticket for hackers. Let me break down the code for you. Don't worry if you're not a programmer. Just check this out. See that first line inside the function? That's where the trouble starts. It's logging all the response headers, including the sensitive ones. It's like accidentally broadcasting your private conversation on a loudspeaker. Lightspeed Cache is huge. We're talking over 6 million WordPress sites using this thing. This is serious stuff, boy. We're not just talking about some small-time blog getting hacked. This could be your favorite online store, your local newspaper's website, maybe even your kid's school website. All of them could be sitting ducks. And the worst part? This is happening fast. The bad guys aren't waiting around. They're probably out there right now trying to exploit this thing before everyone catches up and updates their plugins. It's a race against time, and right now the hackers have a head start. All right, let's have a little intermission here. We've been talking about Lightspeed Cache, but boy, that's just the tip of the iceberg. WordPress plugin supply chain attacks have been going on for decades. Just a few months prior, in June 2024, summer's just kicking off, and WordPress got hit again. But we're not talking about just one plugin here. No, we're talking about at least 5 different plugins on WordPress getting compromised. These hackers, they're not messing around. They're injecting malicious PHP scripts into these plugins. It's like they're planting little digital landmines all over the WordPress landscape. And what do these scripts do? Similarly to the Lightspeed Cache attack, they're creating rogue admin accounts on any website that installs these compromised plugins. These aren't some obscure plugins that only 3 people use. They were installed on over 35,000 websites. The WordFence threat intelligence team uncovered this mess too, but by the time they found it, the damage was already done. The hackers had been working their dark magic for days before anyone caught on. And here's the thing, 2024 isn't the first time something like this has happened either, and it won't be the last. WordPress has been dealing with threats like this for years. Remember the Tim Thumb debacle back in 2011? Or the Rev Slider fiasco in 2014? If you remember these, leave a comment. You are an OG. This supply chain attack, it's just the latest in a long line of WordPress security nightmares. It's a reminder that in the world of WordPress, popularity comes with a price. The more popular a plugin or theme becomes, the bigger a target it is for the bad guys. All right, so back to Lightspeed Cache. After all this chaos, you'd think everyone would be rushing to patch their sites, right? Well, think again. People are pretty lazy. So they start releasing patches. It's like they're handing out bulletproof vests in the middle of a shootout. For those compromised plugins, they're cleaning out the hackers and fixing up their code. Lightspeed Cache. These guys have had it tough. They released version 6.4 to fix that nasty CVE 2024 28,000 vulnerability. You know, the one that was letting hackers walk right in and take over sites? Yeah, that one. They then follow up with version 6.5.0.1 to tackle CVE 2024 44,000. They're essentially playing whack-a-mole with these vulnerabilities, trying to squash them as fast as they pop up. But are you ready for this? On the day they release this critical update, guess how many people download it? Just over 375,000. That's it. It's like sending out a tsunami warning and only a handful of people bothering to evacuate. Now, let's put this in perspective. Lightspeed Cache is installed on over 6 million WordPress sites. So when WordPress.org reports that only 375,000 downloads happened on release day, you know what that means? We're looking at potentially 5.6 million sites still out there, vulnerable, just waiting to get hit. It's mind-blowing, right? You've got this massive security hole, a fix readily available, and most people are just, what, too busy? Didn't get the memo? It's like watching a slow-motion car crash and you can't do anything to stop it. It's not enough to just set up your website and forget about it. You've got to stay on top of these updates, these patches, because if you don't, well, you're basically painting a big target on your back for every hacker out there looking for an easy score. And trust me, they will find you, and they will pop you. All right. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture here. What we witnessed in 2024 wasn't just a series of attacks. It was a full-scale siege on the WordPress ecosystem. And we now know that this isn't really a surprise. Think about it. WordPress has been around since 2003. That's over 2 decades of being a prime target for hackers. Each time an attack happens, we thought, this is it. This will be the wake-up call. But here we are, in 2024, and the song remains the same, just with a much louder volume. WordPress powers about 43% of all websites on the internet. So, what's the endgame here? Are we watching the slow-motion collapse of the world's most popular content management system? Or is this the Phoenix moment for WordPress? Here's a wild thought. What if this is exactly what WordPress needed? Think about it. The internet runs on WordPress, but WordPress runs on trust. And sometimes you need to break that trust to rebuild it stronger. Maybe just maybe, 2024 isn't the year WordPress fell. Maybe it's the year WordPress finally grew up. In cybersecurity, you're either evolving or you're dying. So here we are with millions of websites still at risk. But we're also standing at a crossroads. One thing's for sure. 2024 wasn't the end of the WordPress story. It was just the beginning. If you'd like to hear about what else this website hosting Goliath has in store, then consider subscribing to the channel. The question I leave you with, are you ready for what comes next?
You know how you always hear about childish hackers and phonies? The ones that get caught? Well, today we're going to talk about something that's on a whole other level. The hackers behind state-sponsored cyber espionage. We're focusing on two major players coming out of Iran, APT33, also known as Peach Sandstorm, and their buddies Dev0343. These aren't your average basement dwellers trying to steal credit card numbers. No, these guys are the real deal. Government-backed hacking groups with some serious skills and resources. Now you might be wondering, what the hell is APT33? Well, let me break it down for you. APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. It's like if a regular hacker was a house cat, these APT groups would be like highly trained military attack dogs. They're persistent, meaning they don't give up easily, and they're always looking for new ways to break into systems and steal information. Dev043 is another group that's been causing havoc. The DV part just means they're a newly identified threat that Microsoft's been keeping an eye on. These guys work hand in hand with APT33, and together they've been pulling off some pretty impressive and scary cyber attacks. What makes these groups so dangerous is that they're not just random hackers. They've got the backing of a nation-state, in this case Iran. That means they've got resources, they've got advanced tools, and they've got specific targets in mind. We're talking about attacks on major defense companies, government agencies, and critical infrastructure. In the next part of our story, we're going to dive into one of their biggest operations, a massive campaign that targeted some of the most sensitive and important organizations in the US and Israel. Trust me, it's going to blow your mind how these guys operate and what they're capable of. All right, let's dive into the first major crisis in this cyber espionage saga. Rewind to July 2021, and a new player emerges on the internet. Microsoft's threat hunters spot this group and give them the codename Dev0343. These guys aren't messing around. They're going after some seriously high-value targets. So what's their game plan? They're using a technique called password spraying. Their password spraying attack is pretty clever, actually. Instead of trying to crack one account with a bunch of different passwords, they take one common password and try it on thousands of accounts. In their 2021 campaign through July to October, these hackers hit over 250 Office 365 tenants, focusing mainly on US and Israeli defense tech companies. We're talking about the folks who make military-grade radars, drones, satellites, and emergency communication systems. Real sensitive stuff. But here's where it gets wild. These attackers aren't just going after the obvious military targets. They're also hitting companies that deal with geographic information systems, spatial analytics, and even maritime transportation in the Middle East. It's like they're trying to get a complete picture of the region's infrastructure and defense capabilities. Now let's talk about how they operate. These guys are smart. They're using something called the Tor network to hide their tracks. Imagine if you could make a phone call, but your voice came out of a different phone each time. That's kind of what Tor does for internet connections. Dev0343 is using between 150 to 1,000 different Tor addresses for each attack. It's like they're wearing 1,000 different masks. They've got a pretty strict work schedule too. They're most active from Sunday to Thursday, 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. Iran time. It's like these hackers are clocking in and clocking out, doing their hacking as a 9-to-5 job. Outside those hours, ghost town, no activity. Here's where it gets technical. They're using a tool that's similar to something called O365 Spray. It's a piece of software designed to automate these password spraying attacks against Office 365 accounts. Imagine it like a digital battering ram, constantly hammering away at these accounts, trying to break in. This tool targets two specific parts of the Exchange system: Auto Discover and Active Sync. These are like the front and back doors of an email system. The scary part? This is just the beginning. These Iranian hackers are setting the stage for even bigger operations. They're gathering intel, probing defenses, and looking for any weak spots they can exploit. It's like they're doing reconnaissance before a major offensive. As we move forward in this story, remember, this Dev 0343 campaign is just the opening act. The Iranian cyber espionage game is about to get a whole lot more intense. We're about to dive into some serious cyber warfare action. Remember that Iranian hacking group APT-33, also known as Peach Sandstorm? Well, they're back, and this time they've stepped up their game big time. From February to July 2023, these guys unleashed a massive wave of password spray attacks. They weren't messing around with small targets either. We're talking thousands of organizations worldwide. These Iranian cyber spies were going after some heavy hitters in the satellite industry, defense sector, and even pharmaceutical companies. It's like they were trying to get their hands on everything from military secrets to the latest drug formulas. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. These hackers, they're not just skilled, they're organized. They use something called a Go HTTP client user agent. It's like a digital fingerprint that helps identify who's accessing a website. This one comes from the enhanced HTTP client for Golang. Hackers use the Go HTTP client user agent for a few key reasons. Unlike Chrome or Firefox, which are easily recognizable, Go HTTP client is more generic. It doesn't give away as much information about the system being used. Also, the Go programming language is great for writing automated scripts. Using this user agent suggests they're using custom-written tools, not just browsing normally. Go is also known for being fast and good at handling lots of requests at once. This is perfect for things like password spraying attacks, where you're making tons of login attempts. Additionally, they continued to use Tor IPs, essentially operating out of the dark web, making it super hard to trace where these attacks were coming from. But get this. Despite all their fancy tech and attempts to hide, these guys couldn't help but follow a very human pattern. The attacks mostly happened between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Iran Standard Time. Now, you might be thinking, how effective were these attacks? Well, the scary part is, in a small number of cases, they actually managed to break in and steal data. We're talking about sensitive information potentially falling into the hands of a foreign government. Here's a mind-blowing detail. For each organization they targeted, these hackers used between 150 to 1,000 different Tor IP addresses. It's like they were wearing 1,000 different masks for each break-in attempt. That's some serious dedication to staying hidden. They were essentially operating out of the dark web, making it super hard to trace where these attacks were coming from. So, what we're seeing here is a major escalation. These Iranian hackers are getting more sophisticated, more ambitious, and potentially more dangerous. They're not just poking around anymore. They're launching coordinated, large-scale attacks against some of the most important industries out there. And folks, this is just the beginning. As we'll see later, these guys are about to take things to a whole new level. But for now, let that sink in. Thousands of organizations worldwide under attack from a state-sponsored hacking group, all in the span of just a few months. It's like a digital version of a global heist movie. But this time, it's all too real. Okay, so APT-33, also known as Peach Sandstorm, once these guys got into a system, they went absolutely nuts. It's like they were kids in a candy store, but instead of candy, they were grabbing every piece of sensitive data they could get their hands on. So, here's what went down in 2023. In a small number of cases where Peach Sandstorm managed to break in, they started using tools like Azure Hound and Road Tools. These are like high-tech lockpicks for cloud systems, letting them snoop around Microsoft's Entra ID, which used to be called Azure Active Directory. It's basically the guest list and VIP passes for a company's digital party. But they didn't stop there. In some cases, these hackers had the audacity to create new Azure subscriptions right on the victim's account. Imagine someone breaking into your house and then signing up for cable TV in your name. That's the kind of move we're talking about here. They also abused something called Azure Arc. Now, Azure Arc is supposed to be a helpful tool that lets companies manage their tech stuff from anywhere. But in the hands of these hackers, it became a way to stick around in the systems they'd broken into. It's like they found a way to prop open a back door that the owners didn't even know existed. And in some attacks, Peach Sandstorm deployed AnyDesk, which is a legit tool for remote access. It's like they installed their own security cameras in the victim's house, letting them watch everything going on. Now here's where it gets really technical. In March 2023, these guys pulled off what's called a golden SAML attack. Without getting too into the weeds, it's like they stole the master key to the victim's cloud kingdom. They could go anywhere and do anything in the victim's Microsoft 365 environment. This is basically a worst-case scenario for any network. They even got crafty with some VMware software, using it in a way it wasn't intended, and in a few cases they used something called Eagle Relay to sneak data back to their own computers without raising alarms. The scary part? This is just what we know about. These hackers are good, really good. They're in and out, leaving barely a trace. And remember, they're not just random troublemakers. We're talking about a state-sponsored group with the full might of Iran behind them. So, what does all this mean? It means the game has changed, folks. These Iranian hackers aren't just poking around anymore. They're in it for the long haul, setting up shop in victim systems and stealing who knows what kind of sensitive information. If you thought it couldn't get crazier, then think again. We're now in November 2023, and our Iranian hacker buddies APT-33 are back at it again. But this time, they've got a new trick up their sleeve, something called false font. Now, let me break this down for you. False font is what we call a backdoor. Imagine it's like a secret entrance to a building that only the bad guys know about. Once they install this thing on a computer, they can pretty much do whatever they want. So, what can this false font thing do? Well, it's pretty scary when you think about it. First off, it gives these hackers remote access. That means they can sit in their comfy chairs in Iran and poke around in these defense contractors' computers like they're right there in the room. But that's not all. This malware can also execute files. Basically, it can run any program the hackers want on the infected computer. It can also transfer files back and forth between the victim's computer and what we call a command and control server. It's the hacker's home base where they control everything. This false font campaign, it's not just another cyber attack, it's a whole new level of digital espionage. We're seeing a state-sponsored group targeting some of the most sensitive industries out there. They've evolved from using simple password spraying attacks to deploying their own custom malware within target networks. Now for some seriously next-level hacking stuff. In more recent times, from April to July 2024, our Iranian hacker pals, APT-33, or Peach Sandstorm as some call them, have just rolled out their latest digital weapon, the Tickler malware. Now, this isn't a normal computer virus. This is what the pros call a custom multi-stage backdoor. Think of it like a high-tech skeleton key that not only unlocks the door but also installs a bunch of hidden cameras and microphones once it's inside. These guys aren't messing around with small targets either. They're going after the big fish: satellite companies, communications equipment, oil and gas industries, and even government sectors in the US and UAE. It's like they're trying to get their fingers into every important pie they can reach. But here's where it gets really wild. These hackers are using Microsoft's own Azure cloud service to control their malware. They set up fake Azure subscriptions, kind of like getting a bunch of burner phones, but for cloud computing. Microsoft eventually caught on and shut these down, but man, talk about hiding in plain sight. Now let's get into the inner workings of this tickler malware. Microsoft's cyber sleuths found 2 samples of this nasty piece of work. One of them was hiding in a zip file called networksecurity.zip. Talk about irony, right? They threw in some normal-looking PDF files as a disguise with a pretty ironic name. One of the malware files has a name that'll make your eyes glaze over. Yahsat Network Infrastructure Security Guide, 2024, March 21. It has an executable file extension, but they've tried to trick victims by putting PDF in the name. It's a mouthful, but essentially that .exe at the end is the killer. That's what turns it from a harmless document into a nasty piece of software. This tickler thing is no joke. It can grab system info, list directories, run commands, delete files, and even upload and download stuff from the hacker's control servers. It's like giving someone full remote access to your computer. They can do pretty much anything they want. The scary part is how sophisticated this is. It's not just some script kiddie in a basement. This is state-sponsored hacking, with Iran pulling the strings. Hey, you know what? We're about to get into the real heart of this cyber espionage story. We've been following these Iranian hacker groups, APT-33 and Dev-0343, for a while now, and man, things are heating up. So check this out. These 2 groups we've been talking about, they're starting to work together, or at least their tactics are merging. It's like watching 2 skilled fighters suddenly team up. It's a whole new level of threat. Let's talk about how these guys are leveling up their game. We're not just seeing more attacks, we're seeing smarter, more sophisticated ones. It's like they've been in the gym, working out their hacking muscles, and now they're coming back stronger than ever. Think about it this way. They started out with basic stuff like password spraying, which is kind of like trying every key on a big key ring to see what fits. But now, they're crafting custom malware, using cloud services as cover, and hitting targets that could seriously mess with national security. The scope of their attacks is expanding too. We're not just talking about a few companies here and there. These guys are going after entire sectors, trying to map out the entire infrastructure of their global targets and competitors. But here's where it gets really wild: the potential geopolitical implications. This isn't just about stealing data or making money anymore. When you've got state-sponsored hackers targeting critical infrastructure and government systems, you're looking at potential for real-world conflict. Imagine if these guys managed to shut down a power grid or mess with satellite communications. That's not just a cybersecurity issue anymore. That's a national security threat. It's the kind of thing that could escalate tensions between countries real quick. And the scary part? This is probably just the tip of the iceberg. These Iranian groups are constantly evolving, constantly adapting. They're playing a long game here, and it's clear they're in it for the long haul. So what we're seeing is a perfect storm of cyber threats. You've got increasingly sophisticated tactics, a broadening scope of targets, and the backing of a nation-state. It's a recipe for some serious digital warfare. The big question now is, how do countries and companies protect themselves when the attackers are this good and have this much resources behind them? Hey, let's talk about something that's actually pretty wild. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA. Now, I know that sounds like some boring tech jargon, but stick with me here because this is actually really important stuff. So Microsoft did this study on MFA, right? And the results are mind-blowing. They found that 99.99% of accounts with MFA turned on were able to resist hacking attempts. That's like almost perfect protection. It's crazy, but it gets even better. Across the board, using MFA reduces the risk of your account getting compromised by 99.22%. That's for everyone, not just the tech-savvy people. And if your password has been leaked, MFA still gives you a 98.56% risk reduction. That's huge. MFA is like having a bouncer at a club, but for your online accounts. Your password is your ID, but MFA is that extra check where the bouncer asks you a question only you would know. It makes it way harder for the bad guys to get in. Microsoft did some math to figure out how effective MFA is. But here's something interesting. Not all MFA is created equal. Microsoft found that dedicated MFA apps like Microsoft Authenticator work better than just getting a text message with a code. Both are way better than not using MFA at all, but if you can use an app, that's the way to go. And get this, remember those password spray attacks we talked about earlier? You know, where hackers try a bunch of common passwords on a ton of accounts? Well, Microsoft found that Office 365 accounts with MFA turned on are like fortresses against these attacks. They just don't work. That also sounds a bit biased to Microsoft, but it's true that you are more susceptible to SIM swapping if you use ordinary SMS as two-factor authentication. So, what's the takeaway here? If you're not using MFA, you're basically leaving your online accounts wide open. It's like having a lock on your door but never using it. In this day and age, with all these sophisticated hackers out there, MFA isn't just nice to have, it's essential. We've been on a wild ride through the world of Iranian cyber espionage, and man, it's been intense. So, here's the deal. These Iranian hacker groups, APT-33 and Dev-0343, they've been evolving like crazy. They started out with basic stuff like password spraying, but now they're creating custom malware, using cloud services to hide their tracks, and hitting targets that could seriously mess with national security. It's like watching a hacker movie, but it's all real and happening right now. But the good news is that we've got some pretty effective tools to fight back. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is like kryptonite to these hackers. It's not perfect, but it's damn close. If you're not using MFA, you're basically leaving your online accounts wide open for anyone to walk right in. But here's the thing. It's not just about having the right tools. It's about using them right. Companies and governments need to stay on top of their game, constantly updating their security measures and training their people. Because let's be real, this isn't going away anytime soon. As long as there are valuable secrets and data out there will be people trying to steal them. So, what's the bottom line? Cybersecurity isn't just some tech buzzword. It's a critical part of our national defense, our economy, and our daily lives. Whether you're a big corporation, a government agency, or just an average person, you've got a part to play in this. Use strong passwords, enable MFA, stay alert for phishing attempts. Every little bit helps. This is the new frontier of warfare. It's not about tanks and planes anymore. It's about bits, bytes, and code. And we all need to be ready for it. Subscribe if you want tips on how to protect yourself online from these sophisticated threat actors like SANDSTORM.
Put your seatbelts on, because we're about to dive into some wild stuff that's been going down in the tech world. Today, we're talking about this company called Clearview AI. These guys aren't your average tech startup. They're in the business of facial recognition, and let me tell you, they've taken it to a whole new level. So, what exactly is Clearview AI? Well, imagine if someone could take a picture of you on the street and instantly know everything about you. Your name, where you work, your social media profiles, everything. That's basically what Clearview AI is trying to do. They've built this massive database of faces, and I mean massive. We're talking over 30 billion photos scraped right off the internet without asking anyone's permission. That's like if someone went through every single Instagram and Facebook photo ever posted and saved them all. Insanity, right? Let's break down some of the tech behind this. Clearview AI uses something called biometric data. Think of it like your body's unique signature. You know how your fingerprint is unique to you? Well, your face is kind of the same way. Clearview AI takes these photos and turns them into special codes that represent your face. It's like they're creating a digital mask of everyone in the world. The way they do this is through facial recognition technology. It's pretty wild stuff. Basically, their computers can look at a picture and pick out all the little details that make your face unique. The distance between your eyes, the shape of your nose, stuff like that. Then it can compare that to all the other faces in its database and find matches. But here's where it gets really interesting. Clearview AI didn't just politely ask people for their photos. Nah, they used something called web scraping. It's like they sent out millions of little digital robots to crawl all over the internet, copying every photo they could find. And we're not just talking about public photos either. They grabbed everything they could get their hands on. Now, you might be thinking, why would anyone want to do this? Well, Clearview AI isn't just doing this for fun. They're selling this service to intelligence agencies and police departments. Imagine if a cop could take a picture of someone and instantly know their whole life story. That's the kind of power we're talking about here. And guess what? They did all of this without asking anyone's permission. They've got photos of people from all over the world, including a ton from the Netherlands. And not a single one of those people said it was okay. That's where the trouble starts. And believe me, we're just scratching the surface of this crazy story. So now we're getting into the juicy stuff. Remember how I said Clearview AI was scraping all these photos off the internet? Well, see, Clearview wasn't just casually browsing the web and saving a few pics here and there. No, they were using some serious tech to automatically grab every single photo they could find. It's like they unleashed a swarm of drones across the internet, chomping up every face they came across. Now, you might be thinking, what's the big deal? My photos are online anyway. But Clearview wasn't just storing these photos. They were turning them into what they call biometric codes. It's like they were creating a digital fingerprint of your face. Imagine if someone could take a photo of you and instantly know everything about you. That's the kind of power we're talking about here. But there's more. You know how when you sign up for a website, there's always that annoying terms and conditions thing you have to agree to? Well, there's actually a reason for that. In Europe, they've got this thing called GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. It's basically a set of rules that says companies need to be upfront about what data they're collecting and get your permission to use it. And let me tell you, Clearview AI, they weren't playing by those rules at all. So we've got this American company, Clearview AI, with this massive database of faces from all over the world, including a ton from Europe. They're turning these faces into digital codes that can be used to identify people anywhere, anytime. And they're doing all of this extremely recklessly. They're building a global surveillance system right under our noses. This is where the privacy concerns start to blow up. People are starting to realize that their faces, literally their identities, are being collected, processed, and sold without their knowledge or consent. It's not just about a photo anymore. It's about who controls your identity in the digital world. All right, now we're getting to the part where it really hits the fan for Clearview AI. You know how in movies, when the bad guy thinks they've gotten away with it, and then suddenly the cops show up? Well, that's basically what happened here. But instead of cops, it's these European privacy watchdogs. So check this out. In March 2022, the Italian privacy guys, they're called GPDP, don't ask me what it stands for, they slap Clearview with a massive 20 million euro fine. That's like what? 22 million USD? For a tech company, that's a serious punch to the gut. Just a few months later, in October 2022, the French jump in. Their privacy police, CNIL, hit Clearview with another 20 million euro fine. And just when you think it can't get any worse, the Greeks decide to join the party. They're like, hey, we want in on this too, and serve Clearview with yet another 20 million euro fine. It's like watching a boxing match where Clearview's getting punched from all sides. Just as a reminder, the people handing out fines, like they're Oprah giving away cars, are what we call data protection authorities. Think of them like the referees in a game, but instead of watching for fouls on the field, they're making sure companies play fair with people's personal information. These fines, they're not just a slap on the wrist. They're what the tech world calls administrative fines. It's basically the government's way of saying, hey, you broke the rules and now you gotta pay up. It's like getting a speeding ticket, but instead of $100, it's millions. This is where things start getting really serious for Clearview. It's not just one country saying they messed up. It's Italy, France, Greece. All these European countries are standing up and saying, nah, you can't do that here. Foreshadowing their biggest fine was yet to come. I hope you can see how we're now getting into some real sci-fi stuff. Except it's not fiction. It's happening right now. But Europe wasn't so happy about it. So much so that back in October 2021, the European Parliament, that's like the big decision-making body for the whole EU, they dropped a bombshell. They voted on this resolution to ban what they're calling AI-powered biometric mass surveillance. The technology that can pick you out of a crowd and know exactly who you are. The EU Parliament looked at this and said, nah, we're not cool with this. They want a total ban on using this tech in public spaces. They're worried about some seriously messed up stuff that could happen if we let this go unchecked. One of the big concerns is about something called predictive policing. It's not quite Minority Report, but it's getting there. The idea is that AI could look at a bunch of data and try to guess who's going to commit a crime before it happens. Sounds cool in theory, right? But here's the problem. This AI could end up being biased. It might unfairly target certain groups of people based on things like race or where they live. That's some seriously dystopian stuff right there. The EU is also worried about how this tech could be used to automate recognizing people in public. They're calling for a permanent ban on this. Think about it. You're just going about your day, and suddenly some AI system has tagged you, tracked your movements, maybe even linked it to your social media. It's like being in a Black Mirror episode, but it's real life. Funnily enough, the EU specifically called out Clearview AI as an example of what they want to avoid. Europe took one long glance at them and said, "That's exactly the kind of thing we don't want." They did make one exception, though, for catching criminal suspects. But even then, they're saying you can't use facial recognition databases to prove someone did something. It's like they're trying to walk this fine line between letting cops do their job and making sure we don't turn into a total surveillance state. This whole thing is bigger than just Clearview AI now. It's about the future of privacy, of how we live in public spaces, of how much power we're willing to give to AI and the people who control it. It's heavy stuff, man. The EU is basically saying, we need to put the brakes on this before it gets out of control. And let me tell you, the way things are going, it's a conversation we all need to be having. We're getting into some serious bureaucratic stuff, but stick with me because this is where things get really interesting. So, in June 2023, the European Parliament, the guys who make the big decisions for the EU, decided to take a stand on AI. They're not just talking about it anymore. They're putting together this thing called the AI Act. The AI Act is how they're trying to set up some ground rules for how AI can be used in Europe. They basically want to make sure that if you want to use AI here, it's gotta be safe, it's gotta be transparent, which means you can't hide how it works, and it's gotta be traceable. That last part means they want to be able to follow the breadcrumbs and see how the AI made its decisions. They also said it's gotta be non-discriminatory. That's a big deal, right? They don't want AI systems that are gonna treat people differently. And get this, they even threw in that it's gotta be environmentally friendly. I mean, who knew AI could be green, right? It gets a bit technical here, but I'll try to keep it simple. They're talking about a risk-based approach to AI. Not all AI is created equal. Some of it could be more dangerous than others. So they want to set up different rules depending on how risky the AI is. Think of it like this. You know how we have different laws for different types of vehicles? Like the rules for driving a car are different from flying a plane, right? It's kinda like that, but for AI. They're saying the rules for an AI that's just recommending movies on Netflix should be different from an AI that's making decisions about your healthcare or your bank loans. They mentioned they want to come up with a definition of AI that's technology neutral. That's a fancy way of saying they want a definition that'll still make sense even as the technology keeps changing. They're trying to future-proof this thing. This AI Act, it's a big deal. They're not just reacting to what companies like Clearview AI have done. They're trying to set up rules for all the AI that's coming in the future. If this goes through, it's going to change the game for how AI is developed and used, not just in Europe, but probably around the world. Because when the EU sets rules like this, a lot of companies end up following them everywhere, just to keep things simple. Kind of like Apple's lightning cable shenanigans. So yeah, this AI Act, it's not just some boring law, it's the EU throwing down the gauntlet. Now, we're getting to the real heavyweight bout of this whole Clearview AI saga. In September 2024, the Dutch, the guys with the windmills and tulips, they decided to drop the hammer on Clearview AI. And let me tell you, it was a big freaking hammer. So check this out. The Dutch Data Protection Authority, which is like their privacy watchdog, slapped Clearview with a massive €30.5 million fine. That's about 33.7 million in American money. Just let that sink in for a second. That's not just a slap on the wrist. That's a full-on knockout punch. Now here's why this is such a big deal. This fine isn't just about punishing Clearview. It's sending a message to every tech company out there that wants to play fast and loose with people's data. They're talking about additional fines of up to 5 million euros if Clearview doesn't get its act together. This is like the final round of a boxing match, and Clearview just got hit with a haymaker. It's not just about the money, though 30.5 million euro is no joke. It's about setting a precedent. For Clearview and companies like them, this is a wake-up call. It's not just about cool tech anymore. It's about respecting people's privacy and following the law. And let me tell you, after this, a lot of companies are probably taking a hard look at their own practices. Let's talk about what all this means for the future. So, Clearview AI just got hit with a massive fine, and you better believe it's sending shockwaves through the whole AI and facial recognition industry. But here's where it gets really interesting. While Clearview's getting hammered, other big tech companies are starting to change their game. Take Google, for example. They're rolling out this new AI thing called Gemini for Android phones, but they're doing it totally different from Clearview. They're using what they call end-to-end protection. Now, I know that sounds like some fancy tech jargon, but it's actually pretty simple. Imagine your data is like a letter. End-to-end protection is like putting that letter in a locked box that only you and the person you're sending it to can open. No one else can peek inside, not even the mailman. But Google's taking it even further. They're keeping a lot of the sensitive stuff right on your phone. It's called on-device processing. Think of it like this. Instead of sending your dirty laundry to some stranger to wash, you're keeping it in your own machine at home. Your private stuff stays private. And when they do need to send data to their servers, they're using military-grade encryption. That's like turning your data into a secret code that only Google can crack. It's not just a simple lock. It's like a high-tech vault in the central bank. This is starting to show that the tech world is starting to wake up. They're realizing that if they don't start taking privacy seriously, they could end up in the same hot water as Clearview. Looking ahead, this Clearview situation is probably going to change the game for AI and privacy, not just in Europe, but all over the world. The digital Wild West is finally getting some law and order. We're probably going to see a lot more rules about how companies can use our data. The days of playing fast and loose with people's personal info are over. Companies are going to have to step up their game when it comes to protecting privacy, or they're going to face some serious consequences. So, what does this mean for us, regular people? Well, it might mean that the technology we use every day is going to become more secure and respect our privacy a bit more. But it also means we need to stay alert and aware of how our data is being used. The tech world is changing fast, and we've got to keep up. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out in the coming years. So what do you think about companies like Clearview harvesting images like this? Their database is huge. You, who's watching, just know that if you had a photo of your face on the internet, it's probably in their database. Leave a comment below on what you really think about that.